Okay, public service, emergency and non-emergency operations, message traffic handling. What set of rules applies to proper operation of your station when using amateur radio at the request of public service officials? The FCC rules always apply, regardless of whether you're communicating for a public official or not. Okay. Who must submit the request for temporary waiver of Part 97.113 Yakety Yak to allow amateur radio operators to provide communications on behalf of their employers during a government-sponsored disaster drill? Let me explain what's going on here. You've got someone who works for a government agency. That government agency is going to have a disaster drill, and his employer, his agency, asks him to provide amateur radio communications during that drill. Okay? Now, he's being paid to do that, which is not permitted. But if the agency sponsoring the event goes to the FCC and asks for a waiver that will allow him to be paid to participate in that drill as an amateur, then he can do that. So that's what this question is asking. Who must submit the request for the waiver? It has to be the agency sponsoring the event. And then if that's done, that person can continue to be paid and operate as an amateur during that disaster drill. Okay, when is it legal for an amateur licensee to provide communications on behalf of their employer during a government-sponsored disaster drill or exercise? Only when the FCC has granted a government-requested waiver. Basically, two different sides of the same question here, and you'll have only one or the other of them if you have either of them.
Okay.
What do RACES and ARES have in common? Both organizations may provide communications during emergencies. RACES is the Radio Amateur Civil Emergency Service. ARES is the Amateur Radio Emergency Service. And both organizations, like I say, may provide communications during emergencies. What is the Radio Amateur Civil Emergency Service? It's a radio service using amateur stations for emergency management or civil defense communications. The use of RACES is limited to the emergency management civil defense people. ARES does other folks. It does Red Cross and that sort of thing. And some of your CERT communications in communicating with, for instance, civil defense in Hilo, your CERT communications would come in through ARES operators who are working for the various agencies on the side, well, all over the island, actually.
Okay.
Okay, which of the following is common practice during net operations? To get the immediate attention of the net control station when reporting an emergency. Your net has a net control station who's king of the net and who controls how the net operates. If you have an emergency, no matter what's going on the net, if you call with the emergency and your call sign, or priority and your call sign, everything on the net will stop, and the net control will handle your emergency before they go on with other net communications. Okay? And again, remember that definition, immediate safety of human life and protection of property is what constitutes an emergency for the FCC. Okay, what should you do to minimize disruptions to an emergency traffic net once you've checked in? You don't transmit on the net until you've been asked to do so by the net control station. So once you've checked in, you're listening on the net, and if you have other traffic for the net, you should tell them that when you check in, or if something comes up that you need to pass traffic, you can call net control. But you shouldn't talk to other stations on the net without the permission of the net control. What is usually considered to be the most important job of an amateur operator when handling emergency traffic messages? Passing messages exactly as they are written, spoken, or as received. It's important that messages don't get changed in the process of being communicated. It would be like that old game that we used to play where you whisper a message to somebody at one end of the line and find out what happened to it by the time it got to the other end of the line. You've probably done, what do they call that, rumor or telephone or something like that. And the message can change a whole lot if you're not very careful that it's transmitted exactly as received. When may an amateur station use any means of communications at its disposal for essential communications in connection with immediate safety of human life and protection of property? There that phrase is again, right? Okay, and that's the definition of emergency. And the answer is when normal communication systems are not available. Now what this means is that you can use any frequency, any mode of communication if normal communication is not available. If the only way you can get attention to your emergency is to call the police department on their own frequencies, that's legal. Okay, now you may have to explain to the police chief why you did that later on. But as far as the FCC is concerned, that's a legal communication if it meets these requirements. Okay, what's the preamble in formal message traffic? It's the information needed to track the message as it passes through the amateur radio traffic handling system. So when we do a formal message, it has a preamble which has the person that it's addressed to, the person it's coming from, the date and time it's filed, and all that sort of thing. What is meant by the term check in reference to a formal traffic message? The check is the count of the number of words or word equivalents in the text portion of the message. That way the person receiving it can, they can count the words that they wrote down, and they know, they'll know if they have the right number of words there. So it's a way of confirming that the message has been received properly. Okay? Okay. This is a message form that's used by civil defense, and it may be the one that your CERT will use if you do formal messages. It does not have a place to put the check on it, so I just have operators added down here at the bottom of the body of the message. Okay, here's your preamble stuff up here: to, from, subject, position of the person to, position of the person from, the date and the time. Okay, that's the preamble. Here's the body of the message goes in here, and then the check. And the reply can be recorded back on the same message.